Nothing changes instantaneously. In a gradually heating bathtub, you'd be boiled to death before you knew it. Our Father, who art in heaven. Seriously? What the actual fuck?
Gilead doesn't care about children. Gilead cares about power.
Why does healing have to be the only goal? Why can't we be as furious as we feel?
For whatever man sows, so shall he reap.
Welcome to Above the Garage.
Hi friends, here's part 2 of our Testaments discussion, continued from our last episode. If you haven't listened to it yet, you might want to because we go through the plot pretty well there, so you'll have a better idea of some of the things that we're discussing, I think. I believe I set it up last week as this conversation being more of where the current show stands and how it could move into the Testaments, and there's definitely some of that, but it's also mostly just part 2 of a free-flowing conversation between myself and my friends Megan and Raquel. Both of these conversations are based on the scenario of the Testaments television show following the exact plot of the novel, which of course we all know almost certainly won't happen, and even if it does, there will be a million surprises along the way. We can't wait to see what they actually create and what choices Bruce Miller makes as to where and when to embrace Atwood's details or veer away from the book for screen and show continuity purposes. But here are a few of our thoughts in the meantime while we wait the long wait to season 6 and the Testaments, neither of which have been filmed yet due to the WGA and SAG-AFTRA ongoing strikes. So let's do our round of introductions and dive in. Oh, and come back in a couple weeks for our first character deep dive into the character of June, followed a couple weeks later by Nyx.
Hi, I'm Megan.
Hi, I'm Raquel.
And I'm Kate. So as it stands, what are some of the differences between the show and what the story will have to be?
You know, we do have to talk about, though, Aunt Lydia.
Yes, let's talk more about Aunt Lydia, because I did gloss over a lot of that.
I'm sure a lot of people are like, why is Aunt Lydia all of a sudden Mayday and helping? Well, in the book, it seems that kind of was from the beginning. It started where all the women were rounded up, how they were all gathered up by guardians at their office building. She was a family judge at that time, and they rounded her up with 2 other of her colleagues, and they divided them between like the stadium or the gym, or I can't remember the other place. The pregnant woman went off to wherever she went off to, and her and the other lady went off to the stadium.
Anita. Her best friend, or her friend there was Anita.
Her coworker, Anita. And then they were basically treated like animals. You know, they were there to tortured and
worse than animals. Yeah.
They were going to the bathroom on themselves, sitting in their waste. She talked about how women would be having their periods and just everything was like they were basically pretty much tortured mentally and physically.
Right.
They've put into a think tank, is what it's called.
Yeah, the think tank.
Yeah.
The think tank.
But first at the stadium, they also every day they would sit out there in the stadium and then they would watch as a group of women were marched in and shot, summarily executed.
Right.
And then one day, after they'd been there a long time, 3 of the executors were women in brown,
uniforms.
I don't know, potato sacks or something at the time. Yeah. And then the next day there were 6 women doing the executions. And then, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So they asked, obviously, Lydia to be one of them. And
I
think she refuses at first.
She says no first. It's Commander Judd, too, from the outset.
It is, yeah.
So it's kind of strange that we've never met Commander Judd in the show. I kind of thought he might be introduced this year, but he wasn't.
Because she's known him all along.
But anyway, yeah. So she refuses and she gets put into this tank, which is called a think tank, where she is kind of the way I read it, it really reminded me the second time of June's torture in episode 3 of season 4.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't feel so bad about Lydia. Again, I find it really hard to reconcile the book Lydia with the show Lydia because they're so very different.
Right.
And even though you do feel sorry for her, and I think there's this code that Lydia says that it's best to hold, I don't know if I'm saying that right, throw stones or rocks at people that have them thrown at you.
Yeah.
So that's why she kind of like, at the end, she decides to go with it because it's either you comply or you die.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and then after they, put her in this isolation and tortured her. They also tortured her with like tasers and
Physically,
kicking
yeah.
and all that. But she's in there for like days and days. And then they take her out and they take her to like a hotel.
Yeah, full of food.
And there's a shower and food and literally 3 days of just like, call us if you need anything, call the front desk.
Mhm.
And it's just, I think she said it was similar to like making tough steak or something. Like you beat the shit out of it and then you, fuck, I don't even know. I don't know what the analogy
Yeah,
was.
no, I do remember what you mean, but I can't.
But yeah, obviously it's a recipe for, then they call her back in and they're like, so do you, have you changed your mind?
Yeah,
And
she does.
anybody would have.
Are you going to comply or are you going to die? Basically
Right.
is what she's like, let
Right.
me think of that. I will.
And he even said, like, death wasn't even the alternative. He was like, was level 1 good enough for you? Or do we need to like go
Yeah.
another level? So she's going to be tortured, like, much worse, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Much worse.
She talks about being a plug in the room or a socket in the room, and she thinks about, well, trying to actually put her fingers on it because she just wants to die.
Oh, she's like, you would have to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
She does put her finger in it.
Which again, it just really reminds me of the way June was tortured in that episode by her.
Right.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Even with a like fist and everything.
Right. And then, as you would assume, the next thing you know, she's out in the stadium field executing a group of women. And amongst those women was her friend, Anita. So.
Yeah. And she killed her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, somebody did. Somebody in her.
Judd later tells her that hers was a blank.
Oh.
Like decades later.
Okay. That's right.
I don't know that I would believe that, but, and
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't make you feel
any
much
better. No.
Yeah.
And she also mentions on her memoir that she's been planning this for years. I don't know why it's taking so long. I don't quite get that, but she has.
Had to wait for baby Nicole to grow up.
Yeah, because obviously she was such an important part of the plan.
And it seems like it was always a part of her plan. Like she makes it like she was always a spy with Mayday.
Yeah, she does what she makes it sound like.
And so it is hard to reconcile with the show because you're like,
because we've not seen that at all.
Now we're seeing it, right? We start seeing that in season 4 where you're like, oh, okay, I can see glimmers here and there.
Although it was also interesting because you get the girls, both Hannah and Becca, confessing or telling her or telling each other about what happened when they were sexually abused by Becca's dad.
Right.
And she believes them straight away. She doesn't, how she kind of like blamed Esther when she told her what happened with Warren. She's like, oh, are you sure you didn't entice him? It's such a different personality. But again, yeah, we're seeing her kind of like transitioning to this more compassionate person towards the handmaids, especially Janine. So hopefully she will get there.
She did what she did. Obviously, the aunts need to be brutal. They're there to, honestly, brainwash, humiliate, and do that to the handmaids to keep them in compliance.
And you have to be in that position of power to be able to... Yeah,
they're having to break handmaids is what her job is. You have to break them down, make them compliant.
Yeah.
So she was doing to them what basically
was done to her.
It was done to her because it worked. And now, it doesn't make it any better, but holy shit. What do you do if a gun's to your head?
Right.
And they're watching her. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to be nice to everybody. They're not going to comply that way. Give them a lynch. Everybody takes them out when they're, you would. You're in a horrible predicament.
I think she even says that it's taken her so long to actually be in that position where Judd also trusts her a lot to be able to do this little bit when she gets away with it.
Yeah.
Whereas if she would have done that when she was younger and not in the position of power she is right now,
she wouldn't have had that.
She probably wouldn't have gone away with it.
And what she did to the handmaids actually saved them. It sounds so stupid because she brutalized them. But she got them in line and she said, hey, if it wasn't me, it would be somebody else and it could be so much worse. And it just sucks. It just sucks for everybody in that entire regime, or except for the men, the hierarchy, and some of the women like Serena Joy.
But not all men though, like that's another thing I wanted to mention, like especially at the end, like when they escape Hannah and Nicole, every step of the way they're helped by men. There's a driver, there's the boat driver, there's an economan as well.
That was striking to me.
They're all men and they're all part of the resistance. So not all men in Gilead are evil, some of them are there because they have nowhere else to go, and as we were saying, either you comply or you die. But that doesn't mean they're doing other things behind the scenes and they're trying to help
Right. They're trying to help. Like Margaret Atwood said that this book isn't a feminist book. It's just a book about a woman. But the show, I think, goes another route where it's like they don't really want to see men as helpers like they do in the book. In the book, Mayday, it's a lot of men. I mean, you did see it in the beginning. The nice butcher, Omar, kind of went with Nick. But then it's like they moved away from that. And they did kind of go into like, well, no, men really aren't helpful.
No. Well, they did, though, in season 5. It just wasn't people we knew.
Right.
But they did use a couple. Jaden.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other guardian that has a family has to go back. The one that rescues Rachel, I think her name is.
They have bits and pieces.
But those are also like minor male characters, whereas they had the opportunity to show, obviously, Nick and Lawrence as, you know, people that had built up the power to do more, to do larger things behind the scenes, and instead just make it seem like they're just sitting there enjoying their power and too lazy to help anyone.
In the books, it shows people that infiltrated the power structure and went through the top.
Purposefully, right.
Purposefully. Like a lot of them were the drivers.
That was their goal.
That was their goal.
Yeah.
And they don't really do that in the show.
Right.
And I wish they did, because that was big in the book.
Yeah, me too.
I'm hoping that they will introduce that towards, you know, moving more into the Testaments book. So hopefully, you know, they can do that in season 5. Sorry, season 6, sorry.
I was really expecting it in season 5.
Same.
Yeah, so differences like in this story versus what you think we'll see on screen or what we have to see on screen because of how it's been set up so far in Handmaids?
I think Lydia's past is one of the most obvious one because we've only met her as a teacher.
Yeah.
But she's a family law judge. But there's a few little bits that they go through her background. I see like why I think it's more like almost threatening her. So when she's having one of the meetings when the law changes, they go through her, like the list and says she was married, that she was divorced, that she had one abortion, that she did teach in school for 2 terms, and then she went back to law. But yeah, I think that's the main difference, that we haven't really seen that part of Lydia yet.
Right. Whereas, yeah, her backstory on the show is a failed crush, like sort of, you know?
Yeah, that makes her like be so salty that then takes it out on this poor girl and takes a child away from her. Like, I don't know. Again, it doesn't sound like the same person when you read the book. So, but yeah, I suppose they do still have time to change that backstory in the book because they could take, you know, they could use that as if like she taught for like 2 terms. So
yeah,
right.
I don't know if they will, but
yeah, it still works. It still works. We just need to see more of it.
Yeah.
I think and I think the actual biggest difference that I see is that they've fully established in season 5 that Hannah remembers her past, you know, because she wrote her name, which was like, you know, a very striking moment.
It's the fact that she can write as well that is incredibly surprising, since she doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, I think that might be a memory.
There's actually a passage in the book where she says that it was very difficult to learn how to write because she has never done it. And actually, I think she says like, I'm too old for it or something like that.
Right.
Also, they go through like the little bits that they do in wife school, which she's already in at the moment, which is when she wrote her name.
In the show.
Yeah.
Right.
In season 5. They talk about sewing, they talk about flower arrangement, they talk about they teach them how to run the house and how to do tiny little bits of cooking. They don't talk about painting or coloring or drawing. I would be incredibly surprised if they were even allowed to use any crayons or anything like that they would use to write, because they're not allowed to write, and that's incredibly important for Gilead. And it's so like embedded in the brains that that's only for men, because the brains are so smaller that they can't even comprehend writing or reading. So the fact that they will have these little bits of like coloring pens, so Hannah can write her name and have this amazing impactful scene.
Yeah. What is she? I remember just stupidly in the book they wear like green at wife school.
Yeah, spring green.
Is she wearing purple in that video that Lauren sends, or?
Yeah, it's plum still. Yeah,
it is
the winter color plum, right?
Yeah.
Was it winter? Yeah.
Yeah.
Plum was what the girls were in the winter.
That's in the book, but I think we talked to Leslie.
Book before they go to wife school.
Right.
Yeah, so when they're girls, so pink for the summer and plum for the winter. That's still the girls.
Yeah.
Before they get the period and all of that.
Right. You don't think that they can try to that they'll try to say that Hannah doesn't remember her parents at this point, right? I mean, maybe she doesn't remember Lou, but they can't say she doesn't remember June.
She's seen us so many times, though. That's the thing. Like, we don't have that in the books at all, so we don't know if that's.
Yeah, I mean, she saw her in season 4.
I don't think she would remember Luke, but because
No.
she's seen June a few times, so
Which it doesn't seem like she has in the book.
Yeah,
She doesn't remember her mum.
but if she
No.
can remember how to write her name, she must remember her mom's face
Yeah.
that she's seen a couple times.
She'd just seen her a couple of weeks ago when she was tortured. Yeah.
It could be argued that she wasn't recognized then. I don't believe that to be true at all, but
Well, I suppose, yeah.
it could be argued, I suppose. Yeah,
Because even June mentions it, yeah.
because she didn't respond except for in fear. So
right.
And to be fair, it will make sense because they are petrified and terrified about these handmaids because they've been told this story about them being so
Right.
horrible.
Yeah, she'd seen her like 1 year before at the summer house.
Yeah.
Maybe 2. I don't know.
I know.
But like, you can't say that she didn't remember her then.
unless they do a massive brainwashing, I mean, like, look at what they do.
Like a lobotomy.
Could, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't put it past them.
I mean, and they might.
So, like, honestly, well, look at Tabitha was always like, oh, it was me running through the forest with you. I don't know. They have this way of gaslighting and,
Yeah.
brainwashing and hijacking these kids' memories. So it is possible. But when you're 11,
Yeah.
what was she, 11 when,
10, let's say.
or 10 when she was at the house? Let's say 10. Yeah, that's a memory that's that's an age that's hard to really forget.
And I don't think it changes the story that much either. It's fine.
No, it won't. It won't change the storyline.
Well, she seems to be so, again, so taken aback and so disgusted by the idea of being born to a handmaid. When we notice how that conversation, like, you can't keep the baby. And,
Yeah, she sympathized.
like, she knows a lot about handmaids already when she had that conversation with June. So, again, I don't think they will be able to, like, change that too much what happens in the testament. Again, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, but
Yeah.
it is a very different backstory.
One thing that I've wondered about also is, and I think a lot of people will wonder about, like, when you hear, if you haven't heard the story before, well, why can't Neil and Melanie be, Luke and Moira, or people that we know in the story, raising her? But maybe it won't change the story. But obviously, 1, they get blown up. 2, like, literally, racially, like, they can't be Luke and Moira because
she would know.
Yeah. Or she would know that she was adopted,
Yeah.
You just have to change certain facets one way or the other.
Right.
But then again, those moments are so cathartic for both of them when they find out that who they think their real parents are
Who they are. Such a big moment.
Such a big moment for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That they can't change that.
They can't take that away. It's such a shock when she finds out. Oh my God.
They could, and they probably will take it away.
Oh, I hope not. That's good TV.
I don't see why they would do it, because it is good TV. It's
So
really
good.
good. It's a really good moment in the book. So
Right.
I don't think it would be as impactful when they say, oh, by the way, your mum is a handmaid. Oh, well, I already knew that because I remember seeing that 2 years ago. I was like, oh, well, Neil and Melanie are your parents. Oh, well, I guess that because, they're not white.
Yeah. No. We need all those elements of the surprise and the reveal.
Yeah.
They need to keep those. That's what makes the book.
Yeah. So it's interesting, though, like, throughout all the testaments, you don't see June, you don't see Nick and Luke, you don't see anybody except
Lydia.
Aunt Lydia, the Mackenzies, Hannah, and Nicole that we know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, and Anne Elizabeth. We do know Anne Elizabeth.
And you
That's
do,
it.
yeah. But you do when you're reading the book, you're like, could that be? Could Ada be?
Mhm. Yeah.
Could Aunt Estee be Janine? Or, you do wonder. And even when the doctor was coming, when Crystal, or handmaid of Kyle's, was.
Yeah, that doctor was not very good.
I was like, I would go back to season 3 and that doctor, how
Yeah.
compassionate he was. And the
Right.
doctor getting out of the car, he's like, fuck this guy. What is he saying? He's pissed that this is happening to and I'm like, oh, I see him
Could be that person, yeah.
being that person, the doctor.
It's funny, my impression of the doctor that tries to save Commander Mackenzie's handmaid was that he was, like, freaking out that he wasn't very good at his job. But I have to reread it.
Oh, I had it that he was pissed. No,
Yeah, you're probably right.
because actually it was because he was pissed because Hannah was refreshed to hear him be upset. She
Right.
actually makes a point to say, oh, it was refreshing to hear him, like, honestly care about a handmaid.
He is upset about her, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what a bullshit God, like, or whatever he was saying. He was
Right.
pissed that this was happening. And then I immediately thought of the compassionate doctor in season 3.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm going through my longer notes, and there's a part where Lydia's talking to Hannah, and she's asking like how Nicole's doing at Ardua, you know, how she's coming along, and she does not get high marks from Hannah, and Lydia's like, she's stubborn. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, Cleo comments like that on
Just like what Nick said in 409.
Yeah.
I wonder if they included it. I like Bruce would have included it, or Eric from the Testaments in 409.
You do see a lot of personal traits of the personality from June in both of them, and it's really cute.
Yeah.
Even Hannah is really like impulsive, and she's quite brave, and she has that sort of like vengeance.
Yeah. I like hearing what she's thinking because she can't really say it all outwardly in Gilead, but I like Hannah's feistiness.
Yeah, that's it, feistiness. She's very feisty. And then Nicole sweats a lot as well. It's cute. And I love how she there's that moment when she finds about the name of Commander Mackenzie's handmaid.
Crystal, yeah.
Which you said is Crystal, yeah, but she goes out of her way to actually find that out.
Right.
Well, she kind of finds it out in her
those files that are being left on her desk, or
they find out what you call genealogical
lines. I forget.
Yeah, and she says that by remembering her name, and she's going to take it with her forever. That Crystal existed, and she was there, and she was real. And that kind of reminded me of when June talks about her name and how that gives her power because she keeps it to herself, and then obviously she discloses to Nick, and Nick calls about her name, and she feels like she's known by having somebody knowing her name.
Right. She won't be forgotten.
Yeah, that's it.
Names are important.
The whole thing about names is so important throughout both books.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really cute moment that Hannah has that sort of initiative to wanting to be attached to a handmaid because that's where she comes from.
Right. I like also that they use the code names in the mission at the end when they're escaping Gilead are Mayday and June what?
June Moon.
June Moon. So cute.
And that has to be a wing too of Legion.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that in season 5 we didn't hear anything about Gilead wanting Nicole back. I really expected that to be a larger part of season 5, just knowing that they were setting up for the Testaments.
I know.
Well, technically, they're trying to get June and Nicole back.
They're trying to kill June.
New Bethlehem, or whatever it's called.
That's the people that love her that want her to go to New Bethlehem, Raquel.
I know. That is true. But somebody does. They are part of Gilead, unfortunately.
They don't seem to care much about Nicole.
Because Serena doesn't anymore.
No, Serena doesn't care.
I just want to read the part about Nicole getting a C on her autobiography paper.
Yeah.
Back when she was Daisy in school, she says, I basically disliked baby Nicole since I'd had to do a paper on her. I got a C because I'd said she was being used as a football by both sides and it would be the greatest happiness of the greatest number just to give her back. The teacher had said I was callous and should learn to respect other people's rights and feelings, and I'd said people in Gilead were people, and shouldn't their rights and feelings be respected too? She'd lost her temper and said I needed to grow up, which was maybe true. I'd been aggravating on purpose, but I was angry about the C. Too funny.
Ironic.
That's funny.
I like this quote too. Also, Neil and Melanie weren't like the parents of the kids I knew. They were too careful around me, as if I was breakable. It was like I was a prize cat that they were cat sitting. You'd take your own cat for granted. You'd be casual about it. But someone else's cat would be another story, because if you lost that cat, you would feel guilty about it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
I really like that quote.
And she's so spot on though. Yeah.
It's like she knew. Well, in hindsight, she's able to see that. Okay, that's why they were so weird. I
love that she mentions that when she finds out that somebody tried to kill them, it's what kind of maniac would want to kill somebody so ordinary? And I'm clearly not ordinary at all. But her real parents are also being hunted by the same people because they're clearly not ordinary either. So
yeah,
that was a funny one too. I love Nicole. She's so cool.
You too.
I do. I'm excited. I hope she looks like Nick and June.
Do you think her and Garth end up together? Because I thought they did, but
I do.
How old is Garth?
He only says he's a couple of years older than her.
Okay.
Oh,
he was only 2 when he escaped Gilead himself.
Oh, okay.
He said, and she said he's older than me, but maybe only a couple of years older.
I thought that she kept thinking she was not good enough for him, but like too young was the impression I was getting. So now that I know
Yeah.
he's 2 years older, yes, I think that they definitely.
But I mean, if you're 15 and he's like 19, he probably is like, oh, you're young, like a little sister, you know.
and important years. Yeah.
Back then, even I remember like people who were like 3 years younger, you're like, oh, what a child, you know, when
Yeah.
you're like
True.
18.
It is funny.
Yeah.
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 There's a comment that she says that reminded me of Nick and June, when they're like they're sleeping together because not sexually, because they're waiting for the pale girls to approach them
Out on the
like,
streets, they're just homeless. Yeah.
pretending to be homeless, yeah. And then he's hugging her, and let me find the note. And she says, "Oh, he's acting. I know he's only acting." And then that just reminded me of when June and Nick meet up for the first time, and they're talking and they're like making the jokes about like, oh, what's a nice girl like me doing in a place like that? And
Yeah.
she says,
Yeah.
we're acting because that's what you have to do.
Right.
It reminded me of that.
Yeah. That's a good point.
They have cute little personalities that resemble them.
Yeah, I like them.
Who do you think they should cast? Like, I'm just honestly,
know.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, this last season's baby definitely looked more like Nick and June. They were adorable, obviously, but before that, there wasn't a lot of Nick. Obviously, like Lizzie's the pull
Main.
for most people, and so they're gonna want to make her look like Lizzie. But I really hope they make her look like Nick also.
Like just a little girl with dark hair and bright blue eyes, maybe.
God, how cute would that be?
Yeah.
That'd be so cute.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I was so obsessed with fairy tales this past few days while I read this, but the 3 aunts that are fitting Hannah for her wedding dress really reminded me of the Sleeping Beauty, like fairies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I didn't notice
They're,
that.
like, coming in and
that's
measuring,
true.
and I don't know.
There's a bit about Commander Mackenzie mentioning that Commander Judd is too old for Hannah for like a brief second, which I thought was at least decent of him. When they're deciding they've got 3 people come.
Oh, 3 options for Hannah.
3 candidates for Hannah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
And when they're discussing them, Commander Mackenzie does say that Commander Judd was too old for Hannah.
Right, but Paula wanted Judd.
Oh no, that he was too young to get married. I think he says both of them because Hannah says.
Oh, for like a second, he says something. Yeah.
Yeah, for like a second, and she mentions that like I felt a bit like it was nice of him. Like a second, I felt like I was his daughter again, but obviously not.
It was literally like one statement, and then it was gone. Though, and then they were all like, "Yeah, you should marry Judd."
I think that was just all Paula though.
Yeah, I'm sure, but that doesn't excuse, obviously.
He went out on with her, yeah, totally.
Yeah, I left that out too. They did bring Hannah 3 choices for who to marry, but it was never actually her choice, and
No.
it's obvious that Paula was going to make her choose Judd. Any other choices sucked.
And you did mention that when when Mrs. Mackenzie dies, and Paula kind of like relegates her to like not being her daughter because it's not, and that's why they bring in the handmaid. But that just reminded me of Serena when she has her own baby and she just completely forgets about Cole and how much she wanted her and loves her.
I know.
Right.
Feels like they're the same person, which is really aggravating.
Yeah, that actually reminds me though of one thing I liked about Hannah early in the story is they're like telling the story of Job, and she's the only one that's like appalled that he allows his former children to just be replaced by new children, and this is a happy story.
Yeah, that's true.
And he doesn't care, like that has always bothered me about the story of Job. Like, it doesn't really work like that, but it does in Gilead.
Yeah. I like the little like that we're talking about that when they find out about the story of the concubine. And it says Bible.
Oh God, that story is horrifying.
They're not right about the Bible. They're lying about the Bible or something like that. And then I think it's Becca that says either you believe in God or you believe in the Bible, because they're clearly 2 different stories. And it's so true that they use the Bible to like manipulate these people, but
right.
It's not whatever they're saying that it says in the Bible. It is not true.
Yeah,
and it was really cute to have sweet Becca, say that.
I like Beck a lot. That is another thing that, like, as they were coming up through the on process and like getting closer to one another, we also learned that Hannah is much more faith. She has much more faith than Becca. I think that Becca's experience with her dad killed that, early on.
At 4, which by the way we haven't mentioned, she was raised by her dad at 4.
4 years old. Jesus.
Just so horrifying.
But as the years go on and she gets these files about the reality of what's actually going on in Gilead behind the scenes, Hannah's losing her faith in all of it as well.
Completely, yeah.
It would have to be really hard to keep your faith in a place like that,
Mm-hmm.
having any exposure to the truth. Okay. Training with Garth twice a day for 2 hours. That was a lot of training. Oh, and she has the same thought that we were saying too. Nicole says, in the middle of the night, I had a bad thought. What if the source was only a decoy meant to deceive Mayday? What if there was no important document cache? Or what if the source was evil? What if the whole story was a trap, a clever way of luring me into Gilead? I'd go in and I wouldn't be able to get out. And that's like the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also, the ants had obviously a hierarchy that was developed early on when Aunt Lydia took like a bold step suggesting to Judd that the ants rule the women like entirely and the men have their separate side. But in the end, in the like current time, Gilead, or when Lydia's planning all of this, there's a lot of battle between the ants, backstabbing and stuff, and lying about who's leaving oranges at her statue, etc.
So childish.
Really funny. Yeah.
But they're like poisoning each other as well. Like so
so much poisoning.
Like everybody's like killing everybody.
I would not drink anything there.
Another thing that I found is interesting that I hadn't thought about, I didn't remember from the show or the book, is that they say that they're marrying children or girls this young, not because they want it to be as fertile as possible, as I thought. That's what I thought that was the idea behind it.
Right. I mean, that's what I would say if I were them, but
yeah. But is because they want to avoid them falling in love with somebody else and losing their virginity. So when they marry these commanders, they want them to be virgins. That is why they need to be that young.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Before they're defiled.
So disgusting.
By their manly urges. Yeah.
So disgusting.
I know, how gross.
And again, it's not about the children. It's not about having children.
No.
It's about what the men want.
Because they're giving this infertile motherfucker like 7 girls.
Yeah, I was going to say that Becca, who's obviously the daughter of an economan, which is the dentist that abuses both Hannah and Becca,
right,
is set to marry somebody quite young. I think is the son of a commander, a teenager, I think. Whereas Hannah gets these older, more important men.
Right.
So even then, there's like this, it's an honor for somebody very important to have a very young child marrying a very old man.
Oh, that's so gross.
But I suppose that then that's maybe the ones that aren't biologically theirs, because I'm guessing the ones that are actually the children, their own girls or daughters, they might try to marry them better, like maybe Rose and her dad.
Right.
So I think there might be a difference.
Right. Like a father who actually cares about
them, yeah.
The child.
Right. But again, that's so disgusting because you're literally tearing these children from their parents' arms because you want them so bad, but then you're not even going to treat them like they're your children. So it's just, again, the whole thing is
just give her away.
So yeah, so messed up.
The most important bidder. Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, she's not Mackenzie's.
That's something I left out too, though. Hannah's like quasi arch enemy, frenemy in school, Shunammite. Is that her name?
Yeah.
How she was like, she's kind of bitchy, but she was jealous when Hannah was going to marry Commander Judd, and then Hannah pieced out because she's smart, and then Shunammite ends up marrying Commander Judd, and she's like, "Oh, don't be mad at me."
She's like, honey, I'm not.
Sorry for stealing your husband.
Your old dude who poisons you. Now, she dies, or does Lydia save her?
Tries to. She removes her from the house, and then Judd's like, "Oh, but I want to marry Nicole. Can you like make her sick again?" But obviously, that doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah, I think they discuss on how is she doing.
She dies.
Lydia's like, I think she does though. Well, it doesn't say that.
But they can't do a divorce, so he couldn't.
He asks Lydia to handle it, but then we don't see what happens there because they escape.
No, we don't know. But he wouldn't be able to remarry again.
No.
If she was.
Right.
Yeah.
But he never does, that we know. So
we never know.
Brilliant society. Brilliant.
Probably ends up killing poor Shunammite.
Yeah. Do you have any more like differences between the show? Do you want to talk about how Nick should be Mayday?
I think we can talk about how they could actually appear in the Testament series when they are discussing what they're doing. They could do like a flash of to like what Luke is doing in Mayday, what Nick is doing, what June. Why not?
Show her the picture. Like you say that she's taking pictures of.
They're telling her.
Yeah, you can show it. Right.
Show us the story they created. What they said about them could be its own storyline in itself,
Yeah.
running alongside.
Well, I would like that spinoff, please.
Love to see that.
In the Handmaid's Tale book, they do have a new updated symposium where it almost sounds like Margaret was going to write another book about the Mayday side.
I would love that. That's what I want.
It was, yeah, I was reading and I'm like, oh, they do talk about how like we'll go into more of that later. And it's all about Mayday. And it was super fascinating. If you ever get the updated version of it.
I can't tell you how like fascinated I am by Mayday. That's what I want to see.
Right. I hope we see more of it.
Was that the audiobook, Megan? So I tried to find it and I couldn't. I think we said, yeah, it was the audiobook. Yeah.
Yes, I have it, but they go into it. She just totally revamps it.
Yeah.
And it does go really into Mayday. Like it seems like Mayday is really important to her. And it's kind of sad that they cut so much out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like
of the series.
There's so much of it in the book, especially in the Testaments. But you almost feel like they've combined all of these like different organisms that are trying to like bring Gilead down, like the Female Road, Mayday, the Mayday part in Canada, all of those bits that we've not really seen any of that. And then we only pretty much just have the Martha network, which doesn't even exist in the books.
That's more like the underground female road.
Right, yeah, it must be, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you have the Marthas in the book aren't really, they all seem very like compliant and they all seem very like bitchy about everybody else.
Or so we know, right?
Yeah, the Martha's gonna suck in the book.
It's that whole point of view thing that comes back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like there's no enough background about anybody else. That's fair enough.
We just don't see enough.
But yeah, but the way you kind of like, after rereading the Testaments, the Marthas on the eyes, kind of like how these organizations work, doesn't seem too much what happens in the book, because these people are the people that actually work for the resistance, Mayday, and they're the ones that are actually extracting these women and protecting them and saving them. So it wouldn't make no sense for them to actually be in contact with ICE.
And I would not be friends with Mayday.
No, they wouldn't.
Mayday's not going to say shit to an I unless the I is Mayday.
And they're not all that. I can guess that some of them are, but not just Nick. But
yeah.
Oh, about Nick and June. I mean, I think that it would make a lot of sense to include them in the story, like a little from a marketing perspective, to include the popular characters from the show from time to time in the Testaments.
Just a guest appearance.
Yeah, I mean, it's different reading a sequel book that doesn't take all that long versus watching. I don't know how many seasons this will be. Like, what do you guys think of the Testaments?
I always thought it would be a limited series, 1 to 2 years. It has a clear beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
Like, whereas The Handmaid's Tale didn't, which is why we're having so many seasons. They can't do that with the Testaments.
Yeah.
I honestly think it would be a limited series.
I think it'll be smart to do it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people will lose interest in, again, you literally have the same promise with this child ever leave Gilead.
Right.
With the focus on Hannah, getting Hannah out, like that's shocked me in season 5 that they're still carrying that on. I thought they'd start to set up a way that June would be able to let it go. Like I thought that maybe they'd try and escape and Hannah would be like, no, leave me alone or something.
Canalizing all of that effort into doing something else because
Mayday.
I think they have to introduce some of it for the Testaments as spin-off, because otherwise everybody's going to be like really lost, because it's like watching 2 different shows. I think they'd be clever to just try and to like introduce some of these storylines to actually engage some of the viewers into going into different shows.
Yeah. And Mrs. Mackenzie, like I was hoping Mrs. Mackenzie would be in it more.
But she shall be dead.
Last season, but she really has to be in it more like now because she died.
We got to meet Paula sometime soon.
Yeah. I just want Nick and June in Mayday in season 6.
Yeah.
Everything else can wait until Testaments.
Me too. Please.
As we know they are in the Testaments, that's where they're heading.
Yes. Mayday is so important in the Testaments. It needs to be brought up in season 6.
Yes.
And these characters already, we have like Ada, who actually helped Nicole escape.
Her escape.
That's something we left out. That her escape was totally different in the book. In the Testaments, because it was Ada and other friends in Mayday. Ada and other Mayday operatives that got baby Nicole out.
Through the help of her parents. That's what they say in the Testaments. Your parents.
I think they can still use that, because that happens after she's there's 2 attempts on June's life, and that's when they decide to like, no, because they said the reason why they tried to kill her is because they wanted to like punish her for like getting Nicola out and outsmart them.
Outsmarting them. Yeah, I remember they say that. Yeah.
She outsmarted them.
Yeah, so you're right. By this point, Nicola's already out by somebody else or via somebody else.
Well, Emily, wait, so could Emily be Ada?
Oh, good.
Yeah, she could be. I don't know why she changed her name, but they could just change Ada to Emily.
Yeah, exactly. I would love that, actually. Okay, I think that's a wrap on our discussion of the Testaments. Come back in a couple weeks for our deep dive into the character of June Osborne. Should be fun. Thanks for listening.
Bye.